Half of everything is luck, James. And the other half? Fate. This is Call of Duty. This is Battlefield. This is Halo, and this is Overwatch. All of them and many, many more. In fact, for the majority of the gaming audience today, every single first-person shooter they have ever played owes something to the legacy of one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time, GoldenEye. No, not that one, but the greatness of GoldenEye, specifically for Nintendo 64, can scarcely be overestimated. GoldenEye 007 for Nintendo 64 was published by Rare 2 years after the GoldenEye movie starring Pierce Brosnan came out. People were already familiar with the title, and the movie did well to blast 007 back into the public consciousness, as it was Pierce Brosnan's first time taking on the role in a movie title series that had been gone for a while. And it was the first Bond movie to be more of an original story than the reliance on the novels. Because of these factors and others, the movie breathed fresh, new life back into the franchise. And maybe for a certain generation, it would become what it will always be for me, one of the greatest Bond films of all time, with one of the greatest Bond actors of all time. I just adored this movie. For many of us 90s kids born in the 80s, it was the first one to truly engage us with the coolness of Bond. But success and hype for the GoldenEye movie established prior to the game, and that this was probably one of the best adaptations of a movie to game ever, still that's only a small sliver of why the game that followed a couple of years later marked a new world for video games. This is a story of greatness. GoldenEye for N64. To even begin to comprehend what was a big deal about GoldenEye, well, let's start with what was, for the majority of PC gamers, the very first first-person shooter. A game to be known as that, the first. A game sometimes called the grandfather of all first-person shooters, Wolfenstein 3D. The game came out in 1992, and it's definitely a contentious claim that is often challenged, and probably rightly so, whether it invented first-person shooters itself. But it's pretty clear from different sources that many do take it to be the inventor of the genre of first-person shooters. But there were a number of things lacking. Shortly after, just a year later in 1993, from the same company, id Software, came one of the greatest successor stories, and I would say the first of the greatest FPS of all time, Doom. No proper discussion of FPS should ever go without mention to Doom. Doom is what took the genre, perhaps invented by Wolfenstein 3D, to such great heights of popularity that famously there was a time when there were more people who had Doom than had Windows. In late 1995, Doom was estimated to be installed on more computers worldwide than Microsoft's new operating system, Windows 95, even with Microsoft's million-dollar advertising campaigns. Year after year, straight from the get-go, Doom was the unstoppable name of names when it came to first-person shooters. In 1994, PC Gamer UK named Doom the third best computer game of all time, and the editors wrote that although it's only been around a couple of months, Doom has already done more to establish the PC's arcade clout than any other title in gaming history. In 1995, Next Generation said it was the most talked about PC game ever. In 1996, Computer Gaming World named it the 5th best video game of all time. In 1998, PC Gamer editors called it probably the most imitated game of all time. Doom continued what Wolfenstein 3D began and elevated the fledgling 3D shooter genre to blockbuster status. In 2001, Doom was voted the #1 game of all time in a poll among 100 game developers and journalists conducted by GameSpy. But there are two things to note. One was that Doom was a PC game, which separates itself from the arcade world of gaming for that generation, but more on that later. And two, notice something about Doom and Wolfenstein? Let me show you a moment. GoldenEye proved this is the next level. If you would, let me demonstrate for you IRL in real life first. And if you understand what this is and how massive this is before I even explain it, you gotta like this video right now. That's right. Every great first-person shooter prior, including Quake, that came out a year before GoldenEye in 1996, while Quake was programming-wise the first to introduce true 3D to FPS, allowing for height differentiation, and obviously advancement in polygons improving on Doom to new heights, you still always aimed by centering the enemy into your field of view. But GoldenEye changed that, and you knew the moment you could do this. Today, the idea you should be able to aim your gun at different angles and not just try to fit your screen so your enemy is in the center of your view, as well as being able to zoom when you need, is due to GoldenEye's ingenuity to combine the experience of Virtua Cop from the arcade with Doom, the PC game. In fact, that was the very reason on the first stage of GoldenEye that they give you a sniper rifle in the very first tower that you come across. It was in order to aim down the enemies in the tunnel. The player would understand, this is different. You see, while Doom was the FPS on PC, not in small part because you could actually have network play, and that was a huge part of what made it so popular, but there was still a first-person shooter in a sense in the arcade. Enter Virtua Cop. Now, the arcade is a sort of dying place, but again, we'll talk about that soon. The great thing about Virtua Cop, as opposed to say Area 51 or other arcade shooters where you just hold an actual light gun, which is also a reload function, but Virtua Cop also utilized the 3D polygons to animate your enemy's damage and fall uniquely to where you shot them. They would react to whether you shot them on their hand or their shoulder or something else, whereas in Doom, they just have the same death animation, well, two of them. You either see a regular one or an explosive death. Not only that, but I think pretty obviously was the zooming function. The aiming in Virtua Cop and actual 3D polygon enemies with animation were awesome. But some hold back, and I think retrospectively we might legitimately say so, that it's not appropriate to put it in the genre of FPS, because you didn't really have what you had even in Wolfenstein. That is, you could not free roam. You couldn't just go wherever you wanted to. The screen forced you into different shooting scenes, as if you're shooting on a shooting range and just have to react to what's before you by shooting, and reloading, and then the screen forces you somewhere else, as if to a next stage of a level. But GoldenEye combined all the best things of Virtua Cop to a free roam game like Doom. And also mission objectives and stealth. According to TheGuardian.com, game director Martin Hollis also admitted that the team borrowed the idea of having multiple objectives on each level from Super Mario 64. Prior to this, for first-person shooters, they were more or less, hey, you just survive and clear the stage. Objectives were more or less just bonuses or puzzles you had to solve in order to clear the stage. But in GoldenEye, you often had unique items for each stage, and more importantly, specific tasks. In GoldenEye, you could clear the stage and the level, you could say, but only to find that you failed your mission because you didn't reach one or more of the objectives. With massive success year after year, winning praises, it became one of the great reasons that allowed Nintendo 64 as a console to even compete in the console wars against its greatest rival, PlayStation. Video game journalists have praised GoldenEye for proving that it is possible to create a fun, first-person shooter experience on a console in both single-player and multiplayer modes. When the game was released, the first-person shooter was primarily a genre for PC gamers. Journalists noted that the game opened the genre to a completely new market, and that it was the first big console first-person shooter that truly got it right. The best way I can explain the impact to life and technology, even if this is rough and to reality doesn't exactly fit perfectly, I think this analogy and explanation will make clear the connection it made to us kids, particularly in the 90s. After baby boomers, their descendants typically break into 3 generations, sometimes sadly and wrongly all amalgamated as millennials. But the truth is, there was Generation X, Generation Y, which are millennials, and Generation Z or Z. Doom and its heyday generally fits into Generation X. Of course, I'm not saying Generation Y didn't also play it. I wake up thinking about IDDQD. Anyway, we did, but certainly we weren't taking too much time away from our jobs to play Doom, which was a real problem for some companies apparently, because of course we, Generation Y, were too young to have those kind of jobs anyway. Now, considering Generation X for a moment, they also had an experience that generations after didn't really need. The experience of you having to kind of actually go to an arcade place to play decent games, which PC games like Doom were finally challenging, but for the most part gamers were arcade goers. There you could meet friends and other people, and it was an experience for them. The local arcade was a thing that's hard to imagine today. Generation Y, my generation, got to see decent systems or consoles that played decent games brought into the home for the first time. While Generation X had consoles too, well, to put it politely, they were complete garbage. When consoles became a thing, the big names were everywhere. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation, N64, Dreamcast, and so on as years progressed. Our generation saw that happen in our game playing lives growing up as children. If we could say Generation X was the arcade generation, then Generation Y was the console generation. And GoldenEye was not just a marvel as a first-person shooter for all the reasons I outlined, but that marvel was on a console. Consoles killed the arcade in many ways. Now, PC was there since Gen X and before. I mean, PC Master Race, so they will probably be here well after anything. I mean, maybe one day consoles and PC pretty much amalgamate, but we wouldn't be calling them consoles, we'll still be calling them computers. But for the first time, on Nintendo 64, a console game now had one of the greatest games of all time. And that, it was a first-person shooter, marked a shift in gaming history. A game with greater ingenuity and creativity, ease of use on a whole new level. On console, beyond even what PCs had to offer in terms of FPS, from where the genre was created with Wolfenstein 3D. First-person shooters on console became truly viable because of the massive success of GoldenEye. Turok didn't do it. I guess in the same ways that Wolfenstein didn't, and the importance of it being on N64 versus anything else is something I haven't seen mentioned anywhere yet, at least in my research. You see, the Nintendo 64 is one of the first gaming consoles to have 4 controller ports. According to Shigeru Miyamoto, Nintendo opted to have 4 controller ports because the Nintendo 64 is the company's first console which can handle 4-player split screen without significant slowdown. It was this fact that I want to highlight when it comes to the success of new FPS, specifically on the Nintendo 64 as opposed to another console. GoldenEye had finally combined not only Wolfenstein and Doom's free roam first-person shooter experience with the best of Virtua Cop and elements of Super Mario, but it also brought a sense of community that Gen X had with the arcade, at least in some way. While it wasn't open to public competition, parties could be thrown. And sure, LAN parties and network play for PC with Doom were there, but it wasn't the same as everyone being in the same room, playing off the same console, competing and having fun with friends, getting together for parties, playing off the same screen. Inviting my friends over and playing GoldenEye on 4-way split screen was some of the most precious memories I'll ever have, and it is something exceptional for our generation, Generation Y. Now, if you're Gen Z or Gen Alpha, the best way I can say it is Gen X had Doom, Gen Y had GoldenEye, and Gen Z, I guess, had Halo. Gen X was the arcade generation, Gen Y was the console generation, and Gen Z is the online generation. Halo Combat Evolved was the next great step in first-person shooters. Halo allows online play and party split screens. Halo allowed for more than just 4 players to be in a combat area despite holding an intuitive game controller in your hands. So I'm not gonna make this video about Halo. I can never truly assess how impactful it truly was to Gen Z. But if you're a part of Gen Z and knew exactly how impactful Halo was for your generation, tell me in the comments below. Better yet, make a YouTube video about it and comment the link. I'll subscribe to your channel. But this video here is for all generations to recognize that for first-person shooters, every game you play, every time you aim, that's GoldenEye. Walk around and zoom in with a sniper? That's GoldenEye. Zoom in with any gun? That's GoldenEye. Every time you accomplish mission objectives in first-person shooter games, that's GoldenEye. In fact, part of why console games are even considered where gamers are at is because of the success of GoldenEye. There were low expectations among the gaming media and an unsuccessful showing at the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Atlanta in 1997. New movie, new Bond, new story, new hardware, new game mechanics, excellent audio and visual, even though it wasn't instant. All these factors and many more came together in a harmonized symphony to elevate GoldenEye as clearly, without doubt, one of the greatest of all time. But maybe nobody could have calculated it so with that many factors. So no one expected GoldenEye to be that wickedly impactful, not just to Generation Y, but the whole gaming world from then on, making consoles itself a competitive, viable alternative for first-person shooters. But half of everything is luck, and the other half? Fate. Hey everyone, so that was my video on GoldenEye, one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time. This game I absolutely love. It's also probably one of the few or only first-person shooters, along with Perfect Dark, that I'm actually good at. After that, it completely fell off. But the video that I just made wasn't actually the way I really thought I would make it. It started seeming much more like a documentary, and I wanted to talk more about what I personally loved. This game, I love all the sounds, all the tracks are amazing. All the tones, the way people fall, all the memories I have of it are awesome, including those with Perfect Dark. I didn't even mention Perfect Dark in this video, but Perfect Dark is a great follow-up from Rare to GoldenEye, and that game is awesome too. I still listen to some of the tracks, just like the Combat Simulator track, or even the Caverns track from GoldenEye that help me get through the day or help me get through tough times when I need to go into something that I know I pretty much won't like to go into. I listen to Combat Simulator and feel like I'm ready to act. So this game does have a lot of other things that I really loved about it, but I just didn't end up sharing in this video. I do want to, however, give a great shout out to some of the people who contributed videos and footage to this video to help make it happen, because I don't have a capture card yet, so I couldn't really capture my own footage for this video. There are a number of people, but I definitely in particular want to give a shout out to Grassloo00, or rather 00, providing all the footage, gameplay footage of GoldenEye that you've seen in this video. So if you like seeing like playthroughs or like let's play, definitely if you want to check out GoldenEye stuff, check out Grassloo00 or 00's channel. They got a lot of interesting like challenges too, like running GoldenEye, a 00 agent where all the enemies have golden guns or rocket launchers or grenade launchers and stuff like that. It's really fun to watch, and all that, a lot of interesting things happen in live streams. But also I want to give a big shout out to Decino, who provided the gameplay footage for Doom. Now I didn't show a lot of Doom in this video, but I also still really suggest to go and check out Decino's channel, because I wasn't as passionate about Doom as I was GoldenEye, but still, it's so interesting the way Decino describes some of the, funny things that happen in the coding of Doom. I just love it when people talk about things they're passionate about, even though they're talking about like coding or maybe geography, things that I might not find interesting. If you present it well enough, it could be really interesting. So I hope this video was like that, but with GoldenEye. Subscribe if you want to hear about more stuff that I like to talk about, either 90s stuff or other Netflix stuff, or just check out some other videos if you like. If you do like 90s stuff, good. Check out the Ninja Turtles video I made, or maybe the importance of the Power Rangers video. I promise you it's better than you think, although they're earlier videos, so they're not like documentary style like this or anything like that. Just one more thing I want to be clear about. Although I was talking about generations and stuff like that, I did say there was a lot of rough approximation and there's definitely a lot of overlap still, but I really want to be clear that I'm not saying that Gen Z doesn't know what Doom is, or that Gen Xers never played GoldenEye. They loved GoldenEye too, like everyone loves a lot of different things, and the main point was just that those certain games seem to strike certain generations at certain time in a very important way. As when you're hit by these games, especially if you're going from like 10 years old to like 14 years old, if that's the game that you played for 4 years from being a pretty much almost toddler little kid to a preteen or teenager, that thing is pretty much the game you're playing while your brain literally grows. I mean, it's gonna impact your identity, and definitely GoldenEye did for me.